is becoming increasingly clear that the United States is looking for a justification for starting a war with Iran. Already, they have created as much, alleging that United States troops have been injured or even killed by Iranian-backed forces in Syria and inside of Iraq. Unfortunately, the proof of any of these accusations has not yet really been forthcoming. At least 45 Americans are reporting minor injuries or potential traumatic brain injuries. U.S. defense officials claim that the injuries were caused by groups with links to Iran. In the past, 21 service members were allegedly sustained minor injuries from attacks on U.S. forces at Al-Tanf in southern Syria and on Al-Ast Air Base in western Iraq late last month. Even if we assume these accusations to be accurate, there is one important question that's being left out of this. Why is the United States in both of those countries? Why is the United States inside of Syria? The Syrian government at no point gave the United States any permission to place troops inside of their country. These U.S. troops, which definitely are inside of Syria right now, are illegally occupying the country. But this particular context is not being mentioned by, frankly, any of the U.S.-aligned media in the world. This very important piece of context is very deliberately being left out. Interestingly, the U.S. blames the recent attacks on Iranian-backed militia groups. While they have not said Iran is directing the attacks, U.S. officials say Iran is responsible for funding, arming, equipping, and training the groups. Representatives Ruben Gallo, the Democrat from Arizona, Morgan Luttrell, Republican from Texas, Bill Johnson, Republican from Ohio, wrote a letter to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin asking how the Pentagon is protecting the troops. The department must proactively work to reduce the risk to service members, both to protect our men and women in uniform and to preserve the capability and readiness of forward operating bases. According to NBC News, there have been multiple attacks on U.S. troops in both countries. Since October 17, there have been at least 38 separate attacks on bases housing U.S. troops in Syria and Iraq, mainly by one-way drones, mortars, or rockets. The two attacks that caused the injuries were both on October 18. In retaliation, the U.S. has killed several alleged Iran-linked forces. Once again, we ask the same question. What is the United States doing inside of Syria? They were never invited by the Syrian government to be there. By contrast, Iran, which does have some forces inside of the country, were invited there by the actual president, Bashar al-Assad, in order to help carry out anti-ISIS operations. So they are there legally, while the United States is not. So the United States is essentially trespassing on Syrian property and then killing people who are invited guests of the Syrian government. But all of this context is very deliberately being left out. All that is being reported by the media, all that is being talked about by U.S. politicians is that U.S. troops are being attacked, and thus we then have to defend them. The attempt at justifying war this time around, at least with Iran, is by building sympathy towards U.S. troops that have been killed or even injured by these attacks, by saying the poor troops who are trespassing in somebody else's country. The U.S. is using sympathy towards those soldiers, which is very high domestically at home, in order to justify military conflict with Iran. To make matters worse, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony J. Blinken has falsely claimed that Iran is attempting to cause the Israel-Palestine conflict to spread out into surrounding countries, an accusation that has no evidence whatsoever. On Sunday, he announced that nuclear-powered submarine was traveling through the region. The U.S. makes another complaint. Heading off any escalation by Iran or its proxies in the region is a priority for U.S. officials. The roughly 3,500 U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria have already been subjected to more than 40 drone attacks and rocket attacks by Iran-aligned militias since Hamas invaded southern Israel on October 7, and a wider regional conflict would likely draw American forces deeper into the fight. The United States, citing retaliation for the rocket and drone attacks against U.S. forces, carried out 2 airstrikes last week on sites in eastern Syria that it said were being used by Iran and its proxies. Again, the U.S. is illegally occupying a country. Iraq has already told them to leave. The U.S. explicitly refused to leave the country and continues to carry out the illegal occupation of the country to this day. Meanwhile, allied Arab states like Jordan and Egypt have pleaded with the United States to step in and attempt to rein in Israel to some degree to try to scale back Israel's ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people. However, the United States has done no such thing. Instead, they have gone ahead and actually hindered efforts to get aid relief to Gazans and have consistently gone out and covered up, even whitewashed war crimes committed by the Israeli military. This comes as the Israeli regime has intensified its bombardment campaign against Gaza since October 7, after the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas launched its Operation Al-Aqsa Storm in response to decades of violence against Palestinians. Palestinian officials in the besieged Gaza Strip say that the Israeli regime has dropped more than 20,000 tons of explosives on the territory in its ongoing war of aggression. The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza announced on Monday that the death toll from the incessant Israeli bombardment of the coastal territory stood at 10,022, including 4,104 children and 2,641 women. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.